On this day in 1986, the fourth reactor at Chernobyl nuclear power station in Ukraine exploded, resulting in the world's worst nuclear disaster. 2 died in the initial explosion, 28 died in the following weeks due to radiation poisoning. But the lasting effects are still being discovered today. What was the fallout? And what is the fate of Chernobyl now, almost 40 years on? Well, the accident happened during a test that was being carried out to cool the core of the reactor in an emergency scenario. Unfortunately, the opposite happened. The uranium overheated and it melted through the protective barriers. The reactor exploded, and since it did not have a containment structure, radiation was scattered into the environment. Large quantities of radioactive substances were released into the air for 10 straight days, about 5% of the remaining radioactive material in the reactor core, which is a heck of a lot. And this obviously made the disaster an international problem, but the Soviet Union did their best to hide it. It wasn't until workers at a Swedish power plant detected radiation coming from another power station 2 days later that the Soviets were forced to admit that anything had happened at all. It took 3 days for the first official announcement, and they downplayed it massively. By this time, wind had scattered radioactive material far and wide all across Europe. It took authorities a whole day to begin the evacuation of the nearby city of Pripyat. The initial evacuation was of around 53,000 people, and they were told that they would be away for a few days and to only take what was necessary. They had no idea that this would be the last time that they would see their homes. The exclusion zone grew over the following days and it ended up being 30 kilometres. According to the UN, around 404,000 people were ultimately resettled. Around 600,000 people were brought in to deal with the cleanup operation and were exposed to dangerous levels of radiation. It is so hard to determine how many people died or were left disabled or unwell as a result of exposure to radiation because it's still ongoing. Estimates are in the hundreds of thousands. Today, the 30-kilometre exclusion zone, or zone of alienation as it's also known, love that, remains in place. Incredibly, Chernobyl only stopped producing energy in December of 2000. About 3,000 people are still required to work in the exclusion zone and at the site to ensure that it is shut down properly. But they do so in closely monitored shifts. Some people, known as the Samosely, decided to return to their homes in the exclusion zone. While the Ukrainian government did initially try to remove them, they have been informally allowed to stay there. There are about 200 people living across 11 villages, and they tend to be older people that just wanted to return to their ancestral homes. So, what of the land and the animals that were left behind in the exclusion zone? I'll be honest, I was hoping to hear about three-eyed wolves and shark bears, but alas, no. Scientists are obviously fairly limited and thoroughly undecided in their studies, but wildlife actually seems to be thriving without humans there. Some studies have shown that there are lower fertility rates and higher rates of tumours in animals that are living there, but then the population of wildlife has boomed, so the big question is, how long will it be before people can start living there again? And estimates vary wildly. We've never seen anything like this before. Some people say it'll be 3,000 years, others say 20,000. Others argue that there are animal and some people living there now that seem to be okay, but I mean, obviously you can't reopen entire cities when there's still such a high risk of birth defects and cancers and radiation poisoning and so on. So you can go and visit Chernobyl and Pripyat in the exclusion zone. There's around 50 tour operators that will take tourists into the exclusion zone. Maybe not to Chernobyl, but the Battle of Chernobyl took place in February 2022. And the Russians tried to take the power plant during the invasion of Ukraine. Ukrainian forces have since managed to take the plant back, though. I would absolutely love to visit Pripyat. I think it looks so cool. Would you go once the war's over? Have you been? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Why not subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow.